Thanks, Steve. So the first speaker today is Prashant Jha, who is currently an associate professor and extension weed specialist at Iowa State University in Ames. He did his undergraduate and master's work in plant protection and agronomy in India at Haryana Agricultural University. During his PhD and postdoc, I think this is correct, Prashant, that was with Jason Norsworthy, is that correct? Yeah.
That's right.
He worked on a variety of things, but it seems like herbicide resistance was probably one of the big ticket items. In 2010, he went to Montana State University in Bozeman, and then left Bozeman to take his current post in, was it 2018 or 2019?
2019.
2019, yeah. By my count, and you can correct me, feel free to correct me, Prashant, if I'm wrong, he has over 80 peer-reviewed journal articles listed in Google Scholar, so that's pretty impressive. Today, I'll talk about managing kochia in the West. Prashant.
Thanks a lot, Matt, for the introduction, and Steve, Lisa, thanks a lot for the opportunity today to present this as a part of the IPM Hour. So in today's presentation, I'm going to highlight some of the results and talk about some of the project, give an overview of the project that was funded back in 2016 at Montana State University, which was funded by USDA and NIFA CPPM grant program. As it was an applied research single function program. We started in September of 2016 up until August of this year, August 2020. So I served as the project director, and I'm also presenting this, as you know. Right now, I'm since last year, I joined Iowa State University, as Matt mentioned. But during the duration of the project, from 16 to 19, I was at Montana State University, where majority of this project titled Ecological Management of Kochia and Irrigated Western Cropping Systems was done. I'd like to also introduce my co-PDs in this project, Andrew Kines, professor and weed scientist at University of Wyoming, Gustavo Sabatella at University of Wyoming. Unfortunately, we lost Gustavo back in 2018 from a motorcycle accident. However, we continued the research at his site in Wyoming. Nevin Lawrence from University of Nebraska, Lincoln. He's an assistant professor and weed specialist. So again, this USD and NIFA project in the CPPM program was a collaborative effort between Montana State University, University of Wyoming, and Nebraska, Lincoln. Just to give a brief introduction about kochia, as we know that it is the most troublesome weed of the western U.S. Kochia, which is Bassias scoparia, is a C4 dicot belonging to Chenopode family, and one of the some of the major unique characteristics that I have listed here for kochia, why it is such a most troublesome weed of the West, is it is highly tolerant to drought, salinity, and cold stress. It is one of the first weed that comes or germinates very early in the spring as the snow is gone in Montana, Wyoming, Nebraska area. And it has, we are seeing more and more of an extended emergence period of kochia in the cropping, in the irrigated, as well as the dryland cropping systems of the western US. Kochia has a low seed dormancy, and the seeds are pretty short-lived in the soil seed bank, less than 2 years. It has a, as you can see at the bottom picture, the flower of kochia, it has a protogynous flower. What does that mean is the female flower is receptive to the pollen from a different plant or from a different flower before the pollen shed occurs within that same plant. So that protogynous nature of flowering enforces high level of outcrossing in this weed species. And besides being the most troublesome weed, WSSA, based on the WSSA survey, Weed Science Society of America survey, it has considered the top 5, I would say, the most troublesome weeds in the US crop production. Kochia is a prolific seed producer. You might have seen the unique mechanism of seed dispersal, which is called the tumble mechanism, where a single plant, as you can see, loaded with almost like 250,000 seeds in a fallow situation, for example, in the wheat fallow situation. So the entire year is a fallow. This plant had, in the absence of any competition, gets pretty big, 5 feet wide and 6 feet tall, carrying almost like quarter of a million seeds. And at the base of this, in the fall, at the base of the stem, the plant, there is an abscission layer that forms right here, as you can see in this picture. And the plant breaks at the base of the stem, and it will roll with the prevailing wind direction, which is like 30 to 40 miles prevalent in the northern Great Plains, including Montana, as you can imagine. So that's a pretty rapid mechanism of seed dispersal and movement of that herbicide resistance trait from a single plant across the landscape. In the next year, you will see a solid mat of Kochia emerging in the field. Kochia has a high genetic diversity, as we have seen in our research, looking at the biology and ecology of Kochia across the northern Great Plains, different stem colors, different levels of pubescence on the leaves. And the reason is because Kochia has a wide genetic base. The genome size of Kochia, as you can see highlighted here, is even bigger as compared to some of the most troublesome weeds like Palmer amaranth or common water hemp. So that tells why this weed species is so genetically diverse and can adapt to so many different cropping practices and to different herbicides that we see the rapid evolution of resistance. Glyphosate-resistant Kochia has been documented in 10 US Great Plains states so far. You see in the picture, in the wheat fallow situation, right here, one single plant that was tumbling across the landscape is producing so many plants early in the next year with this rapid mechanism of seed dispersal. So besides this pollen-mediated gene flow, this tumble mechanism of seed dispersal is pretty rapid mechanism. That's how Kochia is spreading the resistance trait. This is not a problem not only a problem in the northern Great Plains dryland wheat fallow production system, but also in the irrigated cropping systems, including the sugar beet on your right, soybean, as well as in corn grown in the Great Plains region. So I would like to emphasize here in talking about the Western US or the Great Plains irrigated cropping system, corn, sugar beet is the major rotation. So the problem is more severe as I said, in this corn sugar beet based rotations, because Kochia has developed multiple resistance to not only to glyphosate, but also to ALS inhibitors, the group 2 herbicides, and dicamba, which is used in corn. So right now, in more than 98% of the sugar beet, conventional sugar beet is Roundup Ready or glyphosate resistance, and you see this trail of Kochia here, which are all glyphosate resistant Kochia, and how widespread the problem could be because of the lack of herbicide, since glyphosate was the predominant chemistry that was used over the top application to control Kochia and other weeds, of course, to control Kochia predominantly in sugar beet. Triflusulfuron, which is a beet, and another product, which is a group 2 ALS inhibitor, was very commonly used. But right now, even before the occurrence of glyphosate-resistant Kochia, the ALS-resistant Kochia was pretty predominant, was widespread across that region. I would say like more than 70% of the populations were already resistant to the ALS inhibitor. So with that being said, there are no other herbicides registered for sugar beet in sugar beet to control Kochia, and that's why we designed this project so that we can develop some effective ecologically based non-chemical IPM strategies in this corn sugar beet based production system. The question arises how we are going to achieve that goal of diversifying the weed control methods in this corn sugar beet. The last year in this picture was corn. This is a picture taken by Phil West at Eastern Colorado. In this particular field, the last year was corn, no-till on the right, on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, this you see it has been tilled in the sugar beet phase of the rotation. Definitely, tillage had a significant, or the cultivation had a significant impact in lowering the Kochia seed bank in the right-hand side, as you can imagine. So how best we can introduce this mechanical practice of tillage in this corn sugar beet rotation. That is the main goal, or the main objective of that was the main objective of this research. So trying to understand the emergence pattern of the Kochia across the US Great Plains, we conducted a field study where we collected more than 50 different populations or accessions of Kochia, starting from Montana, North Dakota, Kansas, all the way to New Mexico, which is NM right here. So I'm showing here just the data for few of the accessions. On the y-axis is the cumulative emergence as a percentage of total, and it was a field study. On the x-axis is the cumulative growing degree days. So the different, you can see how these different populations collected from these Great Plains, they are responding differently with regards to their overall emergence pattern, starting from 10% emergence when they begin to emerge up to 90% emergence. Also, in this particular graph, I'm also laying the relative planting dates of these 4 different crops that are grown in the Great Plains region, starting with winnow wheat, which is planted in the fall, spring wheat or barley, which is pretty common in Montana and North Dakota, Wyoming area, which is planted somewhere in the mid of April as the snow is gone, followed by sugar beet, which we planted, which they in Montana they plant sometime in the April 20, April 25, somewhere there. Corn is the 3rd crop that is planted somewhere in the 1st week of May. And the last crop that we plant is dry bean or soybeans. Dry bean is more predominant in that Montana, Wyoming, Nebraska, Panhandle area. But I just wanted to show you the planting dates of these crops relative to the cumulative emergence graph, as you see, just to give you an idea what level of infestation you will see based on the emergence characteristics of Kochia in each of these crops. So with wheat, of course, definitely it will provide an early season and also late season suppression of Kochia because it is emerging prior to Kochia emergence. Sugar beet and corn are the 2 crops where we had a lot of trouble and a lot of problems in that particular rotation. As you can see, more than 90% of the crop is, or more than 80% of the Kochia is still emerging in this particular crop, which is sugar beet. However, with dry bean, as I said, which is planted late in May or in 1st week of June in that area, more than 90% of the Kochia has already emerged. So that gives us a good idea how we can exploit this crop planting data and include it in our rotation, which is the standard rotation of corn, sugar beet, how we can incorporate a late planted crop, dry bean, in that rotation. Of course, dry bean is grown in that area, so it should not be that difficult to incorporate this as a part of the rotation so that we can exhaust the seed bank before planting our dry bean crop. So these are the potential emergence scenarios which I'm showing here based on our field study, the previous slide that you saw, that you've seen. And early rapid emergence is the typical characteristics of Kochia, which is indicated by the blue line. I'd like to draw your attention to the red line here, which is the delayed rapid emergence scenario, where we think like a stale seedbed approach of irrigation. And depending on whenever that irrigation is able, irrigation and tillage can be utilized to exhaust the seed bank before planting a late planted crop, which is right here somewhere, the dry bean. With a more extended emergence period, we are seeing more and more of this slow and gradual emergence of Kochia as a result of the cropping practices, as a result of the selection pressure from glyphosate and other weed control treatments that Kochia is escaping those treatments and coming later in the season in some of these crops. So how how we can diversify our crop rotations with the inclusion of wheat or perennial forages and alfalfa or cover crops to diversify our corn sugar beet-based production systems to handle that. Overall, the intent of these ecological practices is to reduce the reliance on the herbicides and mitigate multiple resistant kochia seed banks in our irrigated cropping systems of the Great Plains region. So the long-term goal of this project was how can we improve our understanding of the kochia germination ecology and emergence pattern across a north-south transect. North-south transect is coming from Montana up to Nebraska, which is the south. And how we are going to use that emergence and the germination ecology data to evaluate three potential strategies or non-chemical strategies. One is the stale seedbed, cover crop, and improved crop rotations to diversify the system and to reduce the reliance on herbicides and manage herbicide resistance in the irrigated cropping systems of the Western US. So some of the specific objectives for this NIFA, USDA-funded NIFA project was to determine the temperature and moisture requirements under lab conditions for all the kochia accessions that we collected across these three-state region, Montana, Wyoming, Nebraska, and to determine how these non-chemical strategies of cover crop, where we used a winter wheat cover crop, which is well adapted to our region, because we cannot use cereal rye in that wheat growing area. So we selected winter wheat as a cover crop for the study. Irrigation frequency, how many times we can irrigate before planting some of these late crops like corn or dry beans, and the timing of the tillage, and how does that impact the kochia emergence? Can we deplete the kochia seed bank more faster? And ultimately using all this information to develop a hydrothermal model to predict kochia emergence across the region. And what we are right now doing is combining the hydrothermal model data, the historical climate data for that region, and our field emergence data to design and to see the effectiveness of these strategies. So just a brief introduction here on how we did these experiments. Like those are on the right-hand side, you see the 4 sites: Huntley, Montana, Powell, Wyoming, Lingle, Wyoming, and Scott Bluff, Nebraska, where we collected a total of 44 different kochia accessions, 11 from each of these locations. And we started our, the funding was available in fall of 2016. We started our experiments right away, and they were conducted in 2017-18 at Montana State University and at University of Wyoming. A standard experimental design, I don't want to go into the details here. We had 10 water potential treatments all the way from 0 up to negative 2.1 megapascals, and 8 temperature treatments, very low temperature treatment of 4 degrees Celsius, and we have gone further down to up to 2 degrees Celsius. So the kochia can germinate even at 1 or 2 degrees Celsius, and all the way up to 26 degrees Celsius. This is a picture here showing our field studies across the 4 locations in Montana, Wyoming, and Nebraska. It was a strip split plot design with 4 replications, where the strips where the winter wheat cover crop as one strip, and the fallow, which is the no cover crop, is the other strip. This is picture here from Huntley, Montana, from 2018, pretty early in the season here. As you can see, the amount of growth from the winter wheat cover crop here. So those were the 2 strips, and our first split was irrigation frequency of irrigation, which was no irrigation right here, 1 irrigation, 2, 3, and up to 4 irrigations. And within that irrigation treatment, we had further split plot, which is the tillage after an irrigation event, tillage before an irrigation event, and no tillage, which is the standard practice of no tillage. Of course, tillage is also one of the standard practices in that corn sugar beet, or at least prior to the sugar beet planting. So the tillage was done with a rototiller to a depth of 3 to 4 inches, so it was not a deep tillage. And with regards to irrigation, I would like to highlight that the irrigation schedules were as per the local irrigation districts whenever the water was available. Some of the key findings and results from the study. First, I would like to show the effect of water potential and temperature on Kochia germination across the north-south transect. Here on the y-axis is the time to 50% germ, and you are seeing the water potential in negative megapascals. The dotted line is the southern average data for the southern locations, and the other one is the northern location, which is the straight blue line. You see the confidence interval in the shaded areas. They are overlapping across the water potential, which means there was no differences in the time to achieve 50% germination between the north and south Kochia accessions across the water potential or across the moisture gradient. With regards to temperature, we saw a time to 50% germination. The optimum temperature range, which is right here from 14.5 to 25 degrees Celsius. Again, a good bit of overlap between the north and south accessions, no differences there. However, when you are coming into the lower temperature range, in the suboptimal temperature range of 4 degrees Celsius up until 6 or 7 degrees Celsius, we see a separation here, which indicates that those accessions from the north, from Montana, they took less time to achieve that 50% germination compared to the southern accessions, which means that those Kochia populations from the north were more adapted to the cool soil conditions. Looking at the data for the effect of the cover crop, the irrigation frequency and tillage timing here, on the bottom right-hand side, you see the p-values. I'm not showing all the data here. The cover crop treatment, and this is the data from Huntley, Montana, one location, which I'm showing here. There was no significant effect of the cover crop, as you can see in this particular site. The y-axis is the Kochia seedlings in numbers per meter square. By the time of mid-May, more than 90% of the Kochia has already emerged. And winter wheat crop by the time of mid-May, as you can imagine in those cool northern climates of Montana, Wyoming, there's not enough amount of biomass that will make practical sense for weed suppression. So if it was by 10th of June or early to mid-June, that's where we see a lot of biomass accumulation from a winter wheat cover crop. So that explains why we didn't see an effect of the winter wheat cover crop on Kochia seedling emergence. Similarly, looking at the data for the frequency of irrigation from no irrigation up to 4 irrigation events, we didn't see a significant difference. And again, in Montana, Huntley, Montana, the first irrigation was available in both the years. It was available somewhere by 20 to 25th of May. And by that time, majority of the Kochia has already emerged. And that explains why we didn't see an effect of the irrigation treatments there. However, the effect of tillage, as you can see at the bottom, was significant with under no-till conditions, which is the normal practice, or in tillage after an irrigation event, we were able to get more emergence or deplete the seed bank at a faster rate compared to tillage before irrigation. Comparing those results with, I'm showing here the data only for the Scott Bluff, Nebraska as a southern location, example of a southern location. Although you can see differences here in the cover crop versus no cover crop, but those when the differences were not significant. I have explained already why. Coming to the irrigation treatment, yes, we did see a difference of the number of irrigations on the Kochia emergence pattern in the Nebraska location and the Scott Bluff, Nebraska location. The irrigation events occurred much earlier as compared to Montana locations. The first irrigation was available around 10th of April, followed by second irrigation before the 30th of April. And then right around the first week of May, they had the third irrigation followed by the fourth irrigation. So during that time frame, with each irrigation event, if you draw a straight line here, you're seeing a flush of Kochia coming up. So again, to summarize the data here, with 3 to 4 irrigations, which is highlighted by this green color and the black and the gray line, the cumulative emergence of Kochia from the soil seed bank was higher as compared to no irrigation or one irrigation event. In the tillage, again, the effect was significant at the southern location of the study. With a tillage after irrigation, which means we did a pre-irrigation followed by a tillage, we were able to stimulate the germination of Kochia more as compared to no tillage treatment, as you can see here. And the reason was with the pre-irrigation, the seeds were able to imbibe water, and then after tillage that causes soil warming effect, there was more of the Kochia flush that we were able to come out of the dormant seed bank. So definitely that is the stale seedbed approach, which we think did work at the southern location. So just to conclude the study, Kochia can germinate over a wide range of temperature and moisture conditions. We didn't see any differences in the moisture requirements across the north and south locations. However, irrigation frequency and tillage after the irrigation event did stimulate Kochia emergence in the south compared to the north, which means a stale seedbed would be a viable strategy to manage the Kochia seed bank with irrigation and tillage before late planting crop like dry beans in the Scott Bluff, Nebraska area, definitely to exhaust the seed bank in that particular rotation. So definitely a dry bean grown in rotation with sugar beet would be an effective strategy. As far as outputs, we are going to develop these decision support tools, trying to develop a hydrothermal model, which is currently under development this year. We will be able to publish that by the end of this year and use that model to predict the emergence pattern of Kochia across the region using historical weather data and to see how effective these programs are, crop rotation, as well as stale seedbed approach, how effective these programs are for reducing the Kochia seed bank and ultimately to enhance the adoption of these IPM practices that we will achieve using this web-based DST system that we are going to develop from these models. So we are developing this IPM recommendation, which was given to producers at different occasions during the duration of the project, like an early planted wheat and an early harvest wheat offers great crop competitions, especially in the Montana northern area, where we are going to plant the wheat, which is going to be more competitive to Kochia. We have seen that in one of the studies, which was also funded by USD and NIFA, a different program, AFRI program, where we had this diverse rotation of corn, sugar beet, wheat, dry bean, which helped in reducing the seed bank much faster and much better as compared to the standard corn, sugar beet rotations. And again, in this particular study, the stale seedbed approach will definitely be an advantage to reduce the herbicide selection pressure and to reduce the evolution of resistance in that particular scenario. As an output, we were successful in graduating two graduate students. One PhD student will be finishing his dissertation research by the end of this December, and at Montana State University and University of Wyoming. We also trained 4 undergrad summer interns, and during the duration of the project, from this project and the other USDA AFRI and NIFA AFRI project, we were able to publish 6 public refereed journal articles, and 3, including that hydrothermal model, are currently in preparation. We delivered 10 different presentations, oral as well as poster, resulting in conference proceedings at the Western Weed Science Society, WSSA, and North Central Weed Science Society meetings, and 10 extension presentations at different clientele meetings were delivered across the 3 states. This here is the picture of some of the field demonstration workshops and grower meetings that were organized as a part of the extension and education program resulting from this project across the 3-state region. I've highlighted here that our target audience were the local and regional growers, university extension agents, crop consultants, and the commodity groups, and the agronomists and extension weed specialists. With that, I would like to end my presentation. I would like to give my sincere thanks to USD and NIFA CPPM program for funding this research across the 3 states and across the 3 universities, and the support from the Western IPM Center and Montana Wheat and Barley, Western Sugar Co-op, Northeastern Bean Growers Association, and the ag industry. Also, we would like to thank Montana State University, University of Wyoming, and UNL Extension team, and the weed science students who have helped us, and the research staff and the farm managers at each of these universities. With that, I would like to entertain any questions if you have.
Thanks, Prashant. was excellent. Are there any questions for Prashant about his? I'm not hearing any questions. I do have one quick question, but I think maybe in the interest of time, I'll just pose that question to you in an email after we finish up here, Prashant. Thanks very much again. Thank you very much again for presenting today.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thanks. So our second speaker today is Lisa Blecker, who is currently the coordinator for both the Pesticide Safety Education Program and the Office of Pesticide Information and Coordination for California, for the entire state of California. Lisa completed her undergraduate work in environmental science at New College of Florida, which is in Sarasota, Florida, and her graduate work in pest management with Sandra McDonald at Colorado State University. She just recently received an award from US EPA to run the National Pesticide, I think it's national, Pesticide Regulatory Education Program. So that sounds like a lot of work. I'm glad I'm not having to do that. Today, she's going to talk to us about the synergies that exist between IPM and pesticide safety and education programs. And I guess I shouldn't have used an acronym for IPM and then spelled out pesticide safety and education program. So in case anybody doesn't know what IPM stands for, that's Integrated Pest Management. So thanks, Lisa, for presenting today, and go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Matt. I don't have a problem with using IPM. I feel like everybody on the call probably knows what IPM is, and they may just need a little bit of a reminder of what pesticide safety education is. So I'm here as a representative of the IPM Work Group, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about what that is in just a second. So I just want to talk about the intersection between integrated pest management and pesticide safety education. Both of these programs are traditionally located at land-grant universities. And so I want to just give you a brief overview or introduction to the IPM Work Group and what we're doing, and talk about, pardon?
Could you put your PowerPoint in slide view so that, because we're seeing your whole desktop.
Oh, that is not what I intended to happen. Thank you.
Including all those super secret private emails that you were busy drafting.
Oh, well, I closed my email. Is this better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay, sorry, I just chose the wrong little button thing. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the intersection between IPM and pesticide safety education. So as an overview, I'm going to introduce you to the IPM Work Group, talk about one of the activities we're working on right now, which was a survey of the pesticide safety education program coordinators in all 50 states, and talk about hopefully leading a discussion about how IPM coordinators and PSEP coordinators can work more closely together. So the IPM Work Group, we're just one of several work groups that are part of the National Stakeholder Team for Pesticide Safety Education Funding. So this, the National Stakeholder Team is comprised of, I don't know how many individuals, but many, from across most of the 50 states. And it started in 2013 as a response to critically low funding for pesticide safety education programs. We've gone through many funding shifts, both with EPA and with the universities at which we're housed, just collectively as a group. And so there's a stakeholder team to try and address some of the funding gaps. So the IPM Work Group, one of the goals is to demonstrate how coordination between pesticide safety education and IPM programs can benefit both groups. And we feel like IPM can be a key influencer in advancing pesticide safety education as an essential element of the pesticide component of IPM. I was taking notes during Prashant's presentation because I was like, it was just a great lead into what I want to talk about, because his IPM approach to resistant kochia really, I can see a lot of synergies there with the pesticide safety component, especially if he's talking to growers about how to use herbicides to control their resistant kochia. So the IPM Work Group is comprised of, there's about 13 or 14 of us, well, a group of approximately 15 people. And we're comprised of pesticide safety educators located at land-grant universities in each of the regions, each of the 4 IPM center regions. We've got some private industry individuals on the work group, and including Lee Van Weichen, from the WSSA. And then we have an IPM Center representative. So Joe LaForest from the Southern IPM Center is part of our work group, and he has definitely a very helpful and unique outsider's perspective of what we could and should be doing. So just as a reminder, I'm here on behalf of the IPM work group. So I'm not really talking specifically about my California program, just talking about the things that unite us as pesticide safety educators. So I believe most of you on the call are familiar with the National Roadmap for Integrated Pest Management. This is the map that we follow as IPM professionals, and kind of drives some of our activities and drives funding opportunities as well. So it was revised in September of 2018, and the IPM work group, the prior chair and the prior members, before I even entered the scene on the work group, they were instrumental in some of the changes that are being implemented in this revised roadmap. And the primary thing that I'm not going to talk about all the changes, but some of the changes that I do want to talk about involve the explicit mention of pesticide safety in the IPM roadmap. So the roadmap now says pesticide safety education in it. So I just have some snippets in here to give you an example. So pesticide safety education, that pesticide applicators' sound safety and stewardship practices and the safe and efficacious use of pesticides is an important component of IPM programming across focus areas. So weed science, entomology, plant pathology, what have you, pesticide safety education, when you're talking to growers or IPM practitioners about an IPM approach, and your IPM approach includes pesticides, pesticide safety education is integral to that. And so I'm not going to read every single word that I have in here, but I love this last part, public and private, it's talking about investment into infrastructure and pesticide safety education. And then also collaboration with pesticide safety education programs will ensure a significant number of applicators are trained each year on topics critical to the safe use of pesticides. So for example, with Prashant, he's training growers like how they should modify their cultural practices, what it is where these populations are most resistant and adaptable, probably following up with some recommendations on how you would manage your herbicide resistant kochia. And so those people could also get some education on how to wear PPE and how to follow all the label requirements and how to calibrate. All of these things are critical to IPM. So we have this sort of as our guidepost, right? This IPM roadmap. We want to work with IPM programs more closely. And actually, I've worked in pesticide safety education and IPM in the Western United States. I don't have as much experience in other regions, but I do know that the IPM programs and the PSEP programs in the Western states are a little bit unique because they are more likely to work closely together. So keep that in mind. If you're from the West and you're like, we do work together, it's not necessarily like that in the whole rest of the country. So we have some activities that we're focused on for 2020. The first one was a survey of pesticide safety education program coordinators in the 50 states, and I'll talk actually in more detail about that. We have plans to interview regional IPM center directors and also survey state IPM coordinators. Okay, and so just the focus behind all of these conversations that we want to have with people is how can our work group facilitate relationships between PSEP coordinators and their IPM counterparts. So our PSEP coordinator survey, we developed a survey. I can't remember how many questions there are because there was a lot of logic in there. Like if you answered yes to certain questions, you didn't have to answer other questions or what have you. So there was a different number of questions depending on how you answered the questions. So we developed a survey and we implemented the survey earlier in the year, okay? So prior to COVID. So I thought that might have it, that I believe that has an impact on the responses. So our goals of implementing the survey were to understand the ways in which pesticide safety programs currently work with their IPM programs, identify ways that they would like to work with their IPM programs if they're not currently doing that. We want to be able to glean really good examples of successful pesticide safety and IPM program relationships. And so we can develop some good examples, some like positive case studies to sort of market out to, initially we thought we'd just market out to other pesticide safety educators, but you know, maybe we could market those positive case studies beyond just our internal programs and maybe market them to IPM professionals. So just give people some good ideas on how to work more closely together because we have many common goals. So just a little overview of the results of the coordinator survey. So we had a really good response rate. We had 94%. So 47 out of the 50 states responded, but I have to give you a caveat that as I was looking more intensely at the survey results, not every single one of those 47 responses were complete responses, but the majority of them were. And so we did find out through the survey, I mean, we kind of knew anecdotally, but there are many states in which IPM, the IPM coordinator and the PSEP coordinator are the same person, at least nominally or, at least nominally. But for the most part, they're the same person. So that's Kentucky, Vermont, Nevada, Kansas, Idaho, and Missouri. And I've bolded the 3 states where those individuals sit on the IPM work group. So they're one of us, I guess is what I should say. So the coordinator in Nevada is Heidi Kratch. In Idaho, it's Rhonda Hernick. So she works in the IPM program and considers herself one of the coordinators. I know that there has been transition in Idaho. And then Mickey Taylor in Missouri as well. So some of the trends that we noticed, so we had some quantitative data, but we had a lot of open-ended questions. So I don't have a lot of just straight numbers for you, but there are some trends that we noticed. So there's lots of new relationships between these 2 people. So either the PSEP coordinator is new or interim, the IPM coordinator is new or interim, or somebody's getting ready to retire, or somebody just retired and it's vacant at the moment. So there were a lot of incidents of this. And just in general, there's also this lack of capacity. So even when there is a coordinator in each of these programs, there have been retirements. I mean, I know all of you working at a land-grant university and even outside the university, I know you know what I'm talking about. Anybody connected to IPM or outside of IPM, but IPM is my world. So connected to IPM, a weed scientist moves to another university or they retire and their position is not filled. Some parts of their duties are given to somebody else. And so now somebody else is an agronomist and a weed scientist. And then tomorrow they're probably going to be an entomologist because an entomologist is going to leave. So this was very evident in the survey. They felt this pressure both within their programs, but also in their efforts to work with their IPM counterparts. And then there were like structural issues that our pesticide safety coordinators faced. When I say structural, it means something that maybe just a little bit harder to overcome, part of the policy of where they work. So a lot of times we find that like an IPM coordinator or IPM professionals are housed in different departments from pesticide safety coordinators. that just is another hurdle to them working together, particularly if the IPM coordinator is in a campus department, usually a PhD level position, whereas a pesticide safety coordinator is more in an extension department in an off-campus location or whatever. So there's like actual physical distance, but then also this administrative difference between their programs. And it doesn't mean that they can't work together. It just is a little bit harder to do so. I mean, my IPM coordinator, when we're in the office, he works just right around the corner from me. That's not the situation in many places. And also we're identifying some difficulty that our pesticide safety coordinators have with their ability to apply for grants for a variety of reasons. So they don't have PI status. So I forgot what PI meant. I think PI, principal investigator. I'm sorry, I do have PI status, but I just use the acronym, and so now I don't know what it means. So principal investigator status, right, which is a status you have to get permission to even apply for grants. And so for somebody, for example, in my position, I don't automatically get PI status. I have to ask for an exception, I have to justify it, and I get a blanket exception, so it's good for any grant I want to apply for. I don't need somebody else to sign the forms for me or do anything. Like, I can do it, but I have to apply for it every three years. But the ironic thing is my program is funded on extramural funds, but without this exception, I would be dependent on somebody else to be willing to work with me to apply for a grant. So this is the same situation we find in some other programs. And I think even Mickey in Missouri was saying, he gets an exception. He has to request an exception for every single grant that he applies for, and give justification. And so that is something that seems more unique to our pesticide safety colleagues. So we're identifying these things that maybe just make it a little bit more difficult for them to bring in extra funds or to work with other people. But that's not the end of the story. So we've identified some challenges that they had, and I'm just pulling out quotes. I'm not going to tell you who said them because we told people we wouldn't do that without their permission. Just interesting things that sort of paint the picture. So we have a good working relationship, talking about the relationship. This is a pesticide safety coordinator talking about their relationship with their IPM program. So we have a good working relationship, but we operate separately. And there's no judgment in that statement. It just simply is a fact. And maybe historically, that's always how it's been. Mostly distance, this was a question about challenges. Mostly distance in terms of our office location and those of others working on IPM being housed in academic departments creates an impediment as well. So there's just extension departments and academic departments on campuses, just different rules and structures. Like at least in my division, we have a different SPO unit, like the extramural funding unit. It's just different between campuses and off-campus locations. And another pesticide safety coordinator told us that the university, the public, and the IPM team do not always understand our program's role. Which is not to give management recommendations. I get a lot of phone calls like, what do I use to kill this bug in this place? I don't know. That's actually not my role. And so it's a common misconception. I feel I often believe that fewer pesticide applications automatically equate to less risk. And this is not always the case. And so we've discussed this in our work group, that this is maybe a problem that we have with our image or like our marketing and how we talk about ourselves, and like maybe we need to do a better job of marketing what it is we do and what we can bring to the table. So just a couple of successes, or there's more than a couple. I just pulled examples from the result from the survey responses. So there was a pesticide ban on school grounds, and that brought this IPM program and their pesticide safety program together, because when you're dealing with the pesticide ban, you really need like all hands on deck. So it seemed kind of like imposed from above, right? So it wasn't these two coordinators saying, hey, we should work on this. It was they were kind of forced together, but it ended up with them organizing and conducting some programs together to address the needs of this new issue. Some examples of pest management recommendations presented at recertification workshops. So pesticide safety educators, we're providing recertification credits for any number of applicators and IPM professionals in our states, and bringing in an IPM specialist to talk about pest management recommendations, you know, sort of in the middle, all in the mix. That's one way people have been successful working together. Also, study manual development for pre-license study manuals for pesticide applicators. And the last three examples actually were funded by an extension IPM grant in that particular state. So PSEP and IPM were working together on online distance learning recertification courses. In one case, it was fact sheets on pesticide safety and short videos that they coordinated with. And then pollinator protection resources, because there's a lot of pesticide issues going on with pollinators. So that is a really logical connection. So gleaning from the survey, I just pulled out some examples that I was hearing more frequently. So possible ways that we can increase this collaboration with PSEP and IPM. It all revolves around money and also time, but it's easier to commit time to something if you're getting money for it, right? Or if you have money to pay staff. So ensuring that requests for proposals for grant opportunities actually mention pesticide safety education. That really helps when somebody needs to get an exception to be a PI on a grant or to be a co-PI. And also it just helps with being able to include that pesticide safety messaging. So also language and requests for proposals that make it possible for PSEP coordinators to serve as PI. So mentioning pesticide safety education, just something to give somebody who needs a PI exception some justification. And availability of funds to create full-time PSEP position could actually yield benefits for both programs, almost like they were trying to share an educator type position to give IPM messaging and pesticide safety as an extension of that. So the things that we bring to the table as pesticide safety educators, this is just a few short things. We bring many more things to the table, but we have a lot of experience training and communicating with people and getting the word out about really important safety messages and compliance assistance and things like this. We provide job qualifications. People need recertification credits. Otherwise, they don't keep their commercial license, and that's money in their pocket. So people often will come to us, and we also, many of us, have had to rely on income generation for our core activities. And I think we could be experts at this. Like, I understand, may change every single day, but as of today, I understand many of my university's policies for different ways to bring in money. Like, I fund my program from about like at least 5 unique types of money, not just individual sources, just types of money. And so we could be a resource. We also have technical expertise to help IPM professionals make pesticide applications more effectively, right? This is money in the bank for people who are buying the pesticides. If they do it correctly, we're helping them save money on their bottom line. And what we think that IPM coordinators bring to the table, more access to extramural funding, more stable infrastructure, like actual permanent funds for the coordinator's position, which is not, that's not necessarily a thing for pesticide safety coordinators. So that just some stability is really helpful in a relationship. And also you bring technical expertise in IPM that we can add to, but we don't have necessarily, right? And so I know it will take creativity to work more closely. It's not a ton of funding, but there are funding sources that can help with relationship building, and that could lead to bigger and better things like a snowball effect. So what I really want is to know from you guys, how would your IPM program benefit from working more closely with a pesticide safety program? what can you do to foster that relationship, and what can we do on the other end to foster that relationship as well. So that's that is the end of my remarks, but I wanted to keep these questions up here in case they are, I don't know, anybody has a response or just sort of thought-provoking.
Yeah, very good, Lisa. Very good. We did have one question in the chat from Nancy Cushmano in the Northeast. She was wondering if the survey is still active.
It's not still active. We closed it in April or May. I mean, we threatened to close it a lot of times, but we did a lot of like one-on-one phone calls. Hey, you didn't fill out the survey. We need your information. So we technically closed it in either April or May. So, but there's no Northeastern states that did not respond to my knowledge. I know at least, I know off the top of my head, one of the states. I can't remember all of them now.
Is there any plan to re-release the survey at some point in the future?
You know, if somebody from a state that either didn't completely fill it out or that didn't fill it out initially wanted to do that, I would love to hear what they have to say, frankly. So we don't have plans, but I don't know, we could do that.
Yeah. So are there any other questions for Lisa? I'm not seeing anything in the chat right now. If there's not, I do have one question. It's probably a long answer, so it may not be something that you could answer quickly. We don't have a lot of time left. One thing we talk a lot about in IPM is communicating during the COVID pandemic, doing everything virtually and keeping everybody sort of informed of what's going on. And clearly you've had to do something, to keep your trainings going on during this time. So I'm wondering, what could we learn? What could the IPM community learn from the PSEP community about running trainings and during this time where everything is virtual? This is especially important, obviously, because of all the extension meetings that are coming up in the fall and winter, most of which will probably be virtual.
I've had a lot of people who either are part of the IPM program or, just our extension advisors out in the counties. They've asked me, they're like, oh, you did that one thing on Zoom. How did you do that? What do you do? How do you get the hours? And so I now have this email. Okay, here, take this information, call me with your questions. And, but I think PSEP coordinators are unique in that, or maybe they're not even unique, but certainly we have had to figure it out because in many states, the state lead agency has not given any kind of reprieve on continuing education requirements. So everybody in California, there's no grace period or anything for getting your CE. So you need to get it. We already had quite a few online trainings and pesticide safety education programs do that frequently, right? So we have asynchronous or self-paced online trainings. And so we do that. I know a lot of my colleagues have been out there on many different web-based platforms doing training. So in my program, we do 2 webinars a month for continuing education. Everything that we're doing right now is not in person. It's either we're not doing it or we're doing it online. So I can't easily sum up what you could learn from your PSEP coordinator, but I'm certain that you could learn some good stuff. And we learn from each other too. We get together and share secrets and successes and things like that as well. It's a good network, that we have.
Have you collected those, in a document on a website? I mean, have you...
like best practices and stuff?
Exactly.
I can write that down. I mean, some of the emails that I send out are pretty California specific, like this is how you get CE hours for a webinar and whatever. And so not relevant outside of our state, but so a list of best practices for web-based training.
Al, did you have a question?
Yeah, I realize maybe we are out of time, but good presentation, Lisa. I wanted to ask about, you mentioned you're going to be doing a survey of IPM coordinators and that you wanted to interview the IPM center directors. What's the timetable for the rest of that?
Well, we're behind on the regional IPM center director interviews, but we have a set of questions that we have been debating over for so long. But I think we have a final list of questions. We're just basically talking about our engagement plan. To be honest, we got so much rich information from the PSEP coordinator survey. I feel a little overloaded by that. So it's put us behind a little bit. But maybe, I don't know what the actual time frame is, but we're working on an engagement plan because we would like somebody from the work group who is actually a PSEP be part of the discussion with their region. So like, I may not be the person from the Western region, but we've got Rhonda and Heidi who would be really great people to have this discussion with Western IPM Center. And actually Joe from the Southern IPM Center has been helpful and like, yeah, don't say it like that. They're not going to like that, or that's not going to get you the answer that you're looking for, or whatever. So I can follow up with you, Al, about our timeline for the engagement plan. And then we didn't put a deadline on the IPM coordinator survey just because we wanted to see what we got from the PSEP coordinator survey. Thought that might generate some questions specifically for our IPM coordinators. But if any IPM coordinators or regional IPM center directors or anybody who works in those circles has suggestions on conversation topics, I'm happy to hear them. I left my contact information here. Happy to hear what you think that we should ask other IPM coordinators or what have you. But I can write a note out.
Lisa, I want to say one more thing real quick, which is I want to congratulate you for actually asking open-ended questions. And I know it's difficult to make sense out of that data and then to really collate it into like some of the trends that you listed. It takes a lot more work than people realize, but I think it's really important because that's how you really get under the issues. It's kind of hard to formulate. You formulate a survey that's multiple choice. It presumes you kind of know what all the answers might be, So
yeah.
Obviously you want to take a similar approach, I think, at least with some open-ended questions with those other two groups.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, it takes a lot longer to analyze qualitative data than numbers. But we purposely were doing open-ended questions and short answer questions because we just wanted to hear, learn from their experience, I guess. There's no real easy way to can a response to many of the questions that we asked, so.
Very cool.
Great. Well, thank you all. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Prashant, very much for two excellent presentations. That concludes the IPM hour and, 4 minutes for today.
Oh, in 2 minutes. We started at 12.
Oh, fair point. Please join us again next month. Let's see, November, what are we on, Steve? November 11th, right? And I don't know if we have presenters yet for that. Maybe Steve knows. Do you know who the
one yet. It'll be announced in the newsletter and on the website when this gets posted.
Outstanding.
Should be
Thanks again.
In a couple of days. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Thank you.